And so mediumship is really about receiving, whereas, intuitive work, psychic work is more about perceiving.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. And I'm so happy to have another great guest with us today, Deb DeCelle, and she's a wonderful intuitive medium and teacher. So, Deb, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Well, I got to say, I'm so impressed with your background. I mean, now you've gotten to the point where you are teaching at Lilydale, and you're connecting with spirits. So, how did you get to Lilydale? I know Lilydale is a great, renowned spiritualist center in New York State. But tell me about how you got there. What is Lilydale, and why there? Why Lilydale?
Well, Lilydale actually was started as a spiritualist community in the late 1800s. It's located in upstate New York. And it's a really interesting place because they're really the foremost location in the U.S. for spiritualism and things of that nature. It's very much a lovely community of mediums. It's mediums live there. They're very carefully vetted. People can go there to visit, to explore their gifts, take classes, have readings, all of those kinds of things. So it's really such an incredibly wonderful place. I actually pitched to them last year 2 different classes, one being the Unity of Mediumship, which was really just about spirit communication and mediumship as a whole. And then I'll be joining them in person on the 26th of July for a class about the energy of mediumship. So different energetic techniques and things that we can use to help us have better connection with the spirit world.
Well, great. What for people that are seeking a better understanding of spirit and a better connection to spirit, and you being a teacher of mediumship, first off, how do you connect with spirit? How does anybody learn to even begin to go down that road of learning to connect with spirit? Because everybody thinks, oh, gee, it's just my mind.
Yeah. And that's so true. So for many, many years, Chris, I didn't really know what my mediumship was. And I talk about that a little in the book, The Grief Experience. And one of the things that I talk about is experiencing spirit for the first time at a very young age, having lost my grandmother. I didn't know what that was, though. I was sitting almost an out-of-body experience that I talk about a little bit in my chapter. And one of the interesting things about it is I grew up feeling so frustrated and angry. I didn't know what was mine, what was from spirit, and what was just other people's stuff. And so in my 30s, I decided to take some energy healing classes. And when I did, I began to open up more and open up more and open up more. And the messages started coming faster and faster. And I knew I needed to do something with it to help other people. Now, the challenge that I had all those years, it's funny that you say, oh, I thought it was just all in my head, because for years, that's what I thought it was. And so the way that my processing of spirit communication works is it's primarily something called claircognizance, which is just an overwhelming knowing. So I know what I know, but I don't know how I know it. And sometimes I think people read that as almost arrogant. Well, she knows what she knows. But the reality is I have no idea how it works. And so because it comes across as just an overwhelming knowing, there's no delineation between, it's clairvoyant, so I see pictures in my mind's eye. Or, it's clear sentient, clear feeling. So, claircognizance can really be a challenge when we're developing. And so when the messages started to come faster and faster to me, I actually was plugged in with a local group of folks where I was able to really start to develop, to come out about my gifts in a public way and start to work professionally.
So from what I've always understood, and perhaps this will help people listening in, is that would you equate claircognizance as a data download that's coming out of the blue?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
And one way to sort of help delineate that versus a mind might be understanding that it's not coming from your stream of consciousness, your stream of thought. You're thinking A, B, C, D, E, and all of a sudden, R comes completely out of the blue. Like, wait a second, that has nothing to do with what I was just thinking. Why is that coming to me?
Absolutely. 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 And that really gets to kind of be the challenge. And so, when we're learning about mediumship, when we're learning about our skill sets, it's important to be quiet enough to listen. Okay. So just realizing that we are conduits for spirit. When people that work as mediums receive information, it's not them, it's from the spirit world. And so we just need to make sure that we're being quiet enough to listen to what's coming through. And so mediumship is really about receiving, whereas, intuitive work, psychic work is more about perceiving. And so it gets to be a little bit tricky to sort it out and say, okay, like you said, going from A, B, C, D to R in the alphabet, it's like, oh, where did that come from? What is that about? And that's so interesting. Another thing, Chris, that has been coming up a lot that I think has a lot of value to share with your listeners is that it's important to be able to realize what is fear versus what is intuitive information. And I want to kind of give you an example. Sometimes we get into a place where we think something's about to happen, or we're like, oh gosh, what's going on? And so we get into that place of fear and our heart starts to race and we're in fight or flight mode, those kinds of things. When I'm working, if I'm getting to that place, I know that's my human. Okay. Whereas if it's intuitive information, mediumistic information, that kind of thing, if it just kind of comes floating into my awareness without triggering a human response, then I know that that's indeed information from beyond the veil. So I think that's a really interesting point because I'm finding that folks ask that question a lot. What's the difference between imagination and intuition? And so when we're getting into that place where we're almost triggering ourselves, and it's like, oh, that's our human stuff, okay? So it's that floating into our awareness that we then realize is the intuitive stuff.
You mentioned just a second ago listening, being able to listen and quieting our minds, which of course leads to meditation, and which seems also to be the biggest problem that most people have. We're living in a world of continual, rapid sound. We're all on our devices. We're all being bombarded by 1,000 things at once. What do you find to be the best way to get to a point where we can finally quiet that monkey mind? How can we get ourselves to a nice quiet state in meditation without thinking, oh, I got to go take out the garbage, I got to go pay the bills, yada, yada, yada?
Well, it's so interesting because I find that, some folks really need an opportunity to quiet the mind to be able to listen. And then some other, students and things that I've worked with have said, oh, it just comes to me. But when you're first starting out, when you're learning to practice, when you're learning to grow, there are techniques that can be really helpful. And even me, if I'm caught up in a very busy day and I've got all human things happening and I get to the office and I have a reading, it's like, what do I do? I need to get back into my body and not feel like I'm freaking out. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that, Chris. One of them is grounding, and I know it's become kind of a buzzword. What is it? That kind of thing. It's connecting to that earth energy. It's connecting to inner wisdom. And one of the things that happens when we're on electronics all day long, which we all are now, is We become ungrounded,
Mm.
okay? So we're not resonating at the frequency of earth energy. That's why products like grounding sheets now are so popular because, when we can lay on a grounding sheet that's plugged in, it's like, oh, wait a second, I'm getting back to that baseline earth frequency. You don't need a grounding sheet to do that, though. You can do that in a bunch of different ways. You can go outside. This time of year, you can do it with ease. You can walk out in your yard, or a park or anywhere with just bare feet.
Yeah.
You can utilize crystals if you're into those. There's black tourmaline and obsidian and selenite, and all of those are very grounding. Okay, certainly. And also, settling down our human is helpful as well. So not just meditation, which I know a lot of folks struggle with because, as you said, they have monkey mind. Really just giving ourselves an opportunity to release the human stuff. And boy, is that a challenge. Yeah. So one of the ways that I suggest people kind of disconnect and bring themselves back to a place of peace where they're more intuitively operational, as I like to call it, is to do a practice called cord cutting, okay? And cord cutting, whenever we interact with anybody, whether it's on the phone or in traffic or our children or our parents, anyone, there's an energetic thread, an energetic exchange with them that exists. And so when we need to feel like ourselves and not hyper-focusing on what happened with them or what they did or what we did, those kinds of things, it is so incredibly important to disconnect that energy. And it doesn't have to be someone that you dislike. I have to disconnect my energy and cut cords with my boys, my kids all the time, my husband, because I need to feel like I'm living my own experience. And so how do we do that? It's as simple as imagining an energetic thread between you and that person and imagining a tool coming down and severing that connection. And if you just really essentially Google cord cutting, you can find all kinds of meditations and things to talk about.
And I imagine you can also do something very similar using an aura or a chakra cleansing meditation where you just imagine yourself standing underneath a waterfall and again, visualizing that waterfall, cleansing all, the energy that no longer serves you.
I love that. What a beautiful visual. Thank you, Chris. That's amazing. Yes, definitely that would be helpful.
Yeah, I found that to be quite helpful for myself. It's so relaxing. Visualizations, by definition, are so relaxing. Whatever the nice, calm visualization is. Let's say you can't stand underneath a waterfall. Let's say there's one not near you. Close your eyes and visualize it. Oh, and then add like a soundtrack off of the internet. Listen to a waterfall. Guess what? You're there.
Love it. Love it. Love it. I'm going to have to remember that one. Thank you.
Well, you mentioned your grandmother a little while ago. So tell me, what was your first connection with spirit? What did it feel like? How did that influence you, as you went forward?
Well, when I was just shy of 7 years old, my grandmother on my dad's side transitioned to spirit. And I remember my dad calling us downstairs that morning. It was still dark out. And telling us that she had died. And it was interesting because my dad, who was a very powerful man, I also remember him saying, 4 days ago, I knew that one of my parents was going to die. Now, he thought it was going to be his dad, but it was actually his mom. And so my lens from a 6-year-old's eyes was, oh, isn't that interesting? And so we navigated the funeral and the childhood grief in essence. And shortly after that, I found myself in my walk-in closet one day. And I had my blanket with my little 6-year-old self, and I was, playing with my blanket and that kind of thing. And I was kind of almost chanting the name of my blanket over and over and over again. And I talk about this in the grief experience. And what happened was I was saying the name over and over and over, and then the next thing I knew, I felt like I was outside of my body. And I could sense my grandmother, and I thought, how interesting. And so when I kind of came back out of it, I was still saying a word over and over and over again, but the word was aspirin. I was like, what? So I found out as I grew up and got older and things, one of the things that had happened when she passed was that aspirin had interacted with another medication that she was on.
Oh.
And that was part of the reason why her health failed that evening. You know, she was experiencing some illness, but that was just another layer, another piece of it. And I didn't know that until many years later.
Interesting.
So I'd like to say that, you know, I heard from her regularly, or I understood what happened, or things were great. And, you know, I talked to dead people all the time. That's not how it worked for me. I had that one experience, and I didn't really have any other external experiences. They were all internal experiences. So I couldn't figure out what was my own stuff, what was stuff coming in from spirit, and what was just other people's garbage. And so I spent many years really, really angry. But, you know, Chris, you and I grew up in Gen X, so you did not dare step out of line. You did not act out. You did not, you know, do all those things. So really, it became this internal battlefield of trying to navigate and figure out what was happening in my life. And so it had its challenges. And because of the way that my abilities worked, it wasn't, oh, I see a picture, or, oh, I hear a sound, those kinds of things. I just had an inner knowing.
Interesting. And how did your journey expand and develop to the point where you just started saying, okay, now I know it, but I'm starting to have these additional experiences that's pointing me in this direction?
Well, what's interesting is, as I said, I started to take some energy work classes. And as I kind of navigated that world, it opened me up more. And, you know, messages started coming in more quickly. And the first time I ever remember sharing that information was with a neighbor who lived next door. And she had asked us to house sit for her, and while she was away. And so I was in the house one night taking care of her kitty cats. And I started getting this download of information, stuff just coming into my brain. I got the date June 13th. I saw a bottle of Dewar's. I saw a diner-style white coffee cup. I saw a red bar mat where drinks were spilled, like people would put drinks on, and things like that. And so it was just this overwhelming feeling. And I'm like, I think this might be her partner who he had passed away several years earlier. And so I got really brave, and I went to the fence one day and I said to her, I hope you don't think I'm crazy, but... And I started to share. And sure enough, her partner's name, his real name was Steven, but everybody called him Kiki. And so I said to her, I think that this might be information from Kiki. And I shared those facts with her. And she said, June 13th was the day we met. She said he used to bring me coffee every single morning in a white mug that was the old diner style thick white mugs. She said his favorite liquor of choice was Dewar's. And at the club where he used to go and hang out, there was a red bar mat on the bar at all times.
Oh, wow.
So she's standing there saying this, and I'm like, what? This is real? Wait, what? And so after having verbalized that and sharing that out loud, the messages started to come to me more rapidly. You know, messages for other people about loved ones. And sometimes things coming in that I couldn't even like place to a certain person, but I knew I really had something that I needed to help other people heal and to be able to know that their loved ones' soul's energies still exist and live on, and they're with us and around us at all times. So it's really such an interesting thing. You know, I really had to get brave about sharing. And once I did that, it was, my dad passed a few years later. And once that happened, I felt like he fast-tracked me and connected me with the people that I really needed to know so that I could begin to do this work professionally.
You mentioned it's like, oh gosh, I think I'm going crazy when you were talking to, and revealing this information. It seems that so many people who are intuitive, who are having these experiences, who are connecting, they are either afraid that they'll be ridiculed or looked at askance or something, so they're afraid to come out. They're afraid to explain, or worse yet, they get down on themselves and think, "Gosh, am I going crazy?" I'm either, because I can remember just from personal experience thinking to myself, the first time I had an experience, I was thinking, well, okay, now I'm hearing voices and I'm getting this information. There are only two types of people in the world who can do that. Either superhuman gurus or crazy people. Well, I'm not a guru. Oh my God, I'm crazy.
Absolutely. But by having the ability and the capacity to ask ourselves if we're crazy, that shows that we're not crazy.
One would hope, yes.
Yeah.
One would hope. And I think the one thing you seem to have been called to do is this healing. It's whether it started out as energy, now it's mediumship, but the rubric that connects everything is this feeling of healing the recipient. I mean, what's your take on that? How would you explain that to people? And that seems to be the ultimate driver of spirit, and that's why they're coming through.
Absolutely. And, it's so interesting because the work that we do, Chris, is all about healing. And so, I am trained in certain healing modalities, which is wonderful. But when I work on healing through mediumship, I am really looking at sharing information that's going to bring people peace. So, number one, providing evidential information. So, explaining to the sitter or, different things that we have no way of knowing. Okay. So providing the evidential piece of it, but also providing messages from their loved ones in spirit. So not just hammering away at evidence. Also, okay, yes, I believe that life goes on. I believe that there's life after death. I believe that they still exist. You've proven that to me, but what do they have to say? What do they need to share? Those kinds of things. And I feel like there's a great deal of healing and peace in that. And what's interesting too is that when we are doing this kind of work, it's really important for us to be mindful of our language, be mindful of the way that we share information, because I know that sometimes folks think, oh, well, Spirit said it, so I have to deliver it. Well, we're here on Earth, we're human first. And so one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is trauma-informed mediumship, which is really about blending my experience working with at-risk youth and people that have experienced significant amount of trauma and marrying that to my mediumship so that I can provide messages in a healing way that doesn't damage other people. Because we have responsibility in this work, Chris.
Yep.
And truly just letting everything pour out that comes through without a trauma-informed lens can be so devastating to others.
Yeah.
So when we're using mediumship as a modality to help heal other people, it's important that we have an awareness of best practices, of trauma-informed practices, and of healing language to help others.
Yeah. It's so well said. I've always had the belief that mediumship should carry the same ethical principles as medicine, that you do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so critical.
I love that philosophy.
Unfortunately, I've seen some very well-known mediums who perform globally, who I won't mention, who have given everything that they got. And
have created more trauma as they detail the gruesome details of what happened. And you think, why are you giving that detail? You're forcing the recipient to relive everything. Why? They don't need that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important for us to be able to have that trauma-informed lens, because unfortunately it happens all the time where, mediums, not all, but some are like, well, spirit told me, so I have to deliver it. No, you don't, because we're human. And so maybe you can deliver it, but you need to be very careful about the language that you utilize to do so.
Right.
And there are other things that people just don't need to know that may be really graphic and things like that. And delivering that information will be more damaging to the sitter than helpful.
Exactly.
And so that construct of do no harm, Chris, is so critically important. And it's also important for us as mediums, intuitives, light workers to educate ourselves about trauma-informed practices.
Right. Now, taking that understanding of trauma mediumship and trauma-informed mediumship and doing no harm and making sure that you're not passing every single word, we should also be thinking we as humans cannot pick and choose or filter what's coming through, because what we're going to wind up doing is then getting our logical mind in it and then saying, oh, well, that information I shouldn't include because it doesn't make any sense. It's the old saying of give what you get, but give what you get
absolutely
with an understanding of doing no harm. I think that's perhaps the best way to compare the two.
Absolutely. I love that.
And that's perhaps how people can understand that. What I mean, have you had any experiences with spirit where spirit has shown you what it's like for them on the other side, how they're experiencing it on the other side in their life, and if so, how have they described their life to you?
I have, and it's really interesting because when we think of people going to spirit, it's my lens, at least growing up as Episcopalian. It was always, oh, they're in heaven. They're in heaven. So we have these images of wings and white robes and fluffy blue skies and clouds and all of those things. My lens, the reality that I've come to understand is it's almost like they're living in a parallel life. They have things that they do. Certainly there's a measure of peace that we don't have here in the human world. They don't have the attachment to emotion that we have here, but they're living life. They have things that they do. They have jobs that they're assigned. I've had people come through before, especially, one even just a few weeks ago who had passed much, much too young. And part of what he was doing was helping to bring other young people through that didn't really understand what had happened to them and helping them to find family or, people they knew, offering them a measure of comfort. So it is my understanding that some of the lives they lead in the spirit world are very, very similar to the way we live them here, but they're just more peaceful and they don't have that attachment to negative emotions. And so it's really special when they come through in that way and let me know what they're doing or what they're up to, if they're going to play golf or if they're still cooking or taking care of people. So it's really just such an interesting understanding to have. So yeah, really, really exciting and really interesting.
Yeah, interesting. And one of the things I've come to understand is the power of thought, especially the power of thought in the spirit world. And it would be beautiful. They keep on saying the power of thought is so strong. If we could only learn to use the power of thought in the human world. What's your take on their continual messages about the power of your own thought is far greater than what you are using it to be right now?
100% I agree. Here's what's interesting is when people transition to spirit, they have what's called 360-degree perspective. So they can see things from all different sides. They can see their own shortcomings. They can see communication challenges that they may have had here in the physical world. And what's interesting is oftentimes, if you've had a complicated relationship with a parent or a loved one who is now transitioned to spirit, you may find that they can be more of an ally for you from the other side than they were here in the physical world. And certainly that has to be in your own timing. But what's interesting is they can impart wisdom from a perspective that they didn't have here because they were human. So they can give us perspective about, okay, you're only using this much of your brain. Let me show you how to work with energetic frequency so that you can create your own reality. Let me show you how to work with the part of your brain that's going to create the frequency that's going to allow you and empower you to create your own reality.
Right.
Now, the common word is, the common buzzword is manifesting. I choose to call it creating your own reality because manifesting implies a little bit that, it's kind of something that happens to you. Whereas creating your own reality to me speaks to more of a language of creation and co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting because they have the ability and the capacity to share those things from the spirit realm, which are so valuable to us still here in the human world.
Yeah. I love the fact that you brought in both the concept of the vibration and the understanding of vibration, as well as the fact that you're talking about creating a reality. Because from what we are seeing in our human world, we're only picking up what our five senses can bring in, and that's a limited perspective. And in fact, what's actually happening is we're creating every single day our reality with our energy, with our vibration. And as we change our thoughts, we change our direction, we change our reality, because essentially we're living in a false and illusory world.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how thought can really change your trajectory, because when, it's really true, where focus goes, energy flows. And I just want to speak to this for a second, because I feel like the self-help industry has done a disservice to us in put us in this place of what I call toxic positivity, which is good vibes only, like all the time, every day, all day. And so it's created a culture of people who are running from their feelings, and they're running from their feelings in a variety of different ways. But it's so important for us to process that human stuff, to be able to lay it down so that we can focus on what we want as opposed to what we don't want. And so navigating those human constructs and utilizing tools so that you can be set free from your own human stuff is so critically important, because people can therapy things to death for years and still not make progress because they're not given the tools that they need to shift the energy. Because energy and frequency are everything.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole concept, is that everything in existence, 99.999% of everything in existence is energy. And, quantum science, quantum physics describes that as that, so if everything is energy, then we use our energy to create what's out there.
Absolutely.
You were talking about on how we focus our energy. I think, can you talk to the concept of actually focusing our energy on what we want, specifically that we all want joy, although we just don't actually think about it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think where a lot of folks drop the ball on creating their own reality is the feeling of things, okay? Because feeling is frequency. Frequency creates reality. So it's really important for you to be taking a little time every day to feel or look at things or be in a situation where you're feeling that frequency, where you're feeling that joy. And it can be something really silly. If I'm having kind of a tough day and I want to kind of escape for a few minutes, I'll pick up that magical little box I call my iPhone and start looking at toys from the 80s when I was growing up, And it brings me that measure of childlike joy, peace, and wonder. And, certainly my childhood was rather tumultuous, but those toys that I had, those experiences that I had, those brought me a lot of joy. And so when I look at that and I'm feeling that frequency and looking at Smurfs and Cabbage Patch Dolls and all of those things, it lights me up inside, okay? And then I'm operating at that frequency of joy. And so the universe says, oh, she likes to feel that way. Here you go. So when we're experiencing, maybe 10 to 15 minutes of focused energy each day of things that excite us or that bring us joy or make us happy, the universe says, yes, that's what she wants. That's how she wants to feel. Okay, here's something else that'll help you feel this way. And here's something else that'll help you feel this way. And it becomes truly a ripple effect. And it's so amazing to be a part of and to experience.
And it sounds like, you're talking about joy, and it even sounds like you're going towards the law of attraction, magnetic energy. You're attracting that positive energy, attracting that joy. We could even say, focus on the joy in the moment. And how do you do that? Focus on gratitude for the simplest things. I love my coffee. I love my food. I love that sunset. I am so happy to be surrounded by, green grass. I am so, the silliest things that we all take for granted. If we focus on that and then be grateful for that creates the joy.
Absolutely. And, it's really funny because when we hear the phrase mindfulness practices, some people are like, oh boy, here we go again, chakras and yoga. And those things are absolutely amazing. But they don't seem to realize that they're in the driver's seat. So, yeah, you can go out and walk on your grass, walk through the yard, pick up the sticks, mow the lawn, do the things you got to do. Or you can take off your shoes and you can walk in your grass and feel how cool it is or how warm it is, or if it's moist or if it's dry. You can get down to the ground and look at a blade of grass and how truly magnificent that is. You can listen to any sounds of water or birds and even traffic, and it comes into your mind and you can just dismiss and release it. But I love what you said, which is basically finding the joy in those everyday moments. I was super excited yesterday because I went to a convenience store and I found that they were actually now carrying an organic drink that I like. And I was like, yes, that's so cool. So finding those pieces of joy, certainly you can carve out those 10 to 15 minutes of time to bring yourself joy, but also finding joy and gratitude as we navigate the day in real time as life is happening. And that's so exciting.
Yeah. Would you recommend or support the concept of people, trying to write a gratitude journal, like write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and it'll take you like 5 minutes and do it once a day?
Absolutely. And I love that idea because here's the thing. When we develop a consistent practice of something, what's interesting is it seems like maybe no big deal at first, and then you're a week out, and then you're 2 weeks out, and then you're a month out, and you start to look back and say, oh, wait a second. I feel differently, or I'm responding to things differently, or I'm acting differently. And that consistent practice of writing down 3 things that you're grateful for every morning or every evening seems so small and so simple. And yet, as time goes on, as you continue with that consistent practice, it becomes a habit, okay? And then your habit becomes gratitude. And how incredibly joyful is that? So I love that you brought that up, the journaling, the having, a gratitude journal, things like that. And, some people are like, oh boy, it's a very simple practice and something that can really be such a game changer for people. And, you don't really think anything of it. You're like, oh, what's writing 3 things down going to do for me? And like I said, then you're 2 days out and 5 days out and 7 days out and 21 days out and 30 days out. And you start to notice that you're viewing the world differently, that you're acting differently, that you're experiencing things differently. And then it becomes something that's really, truly magnificent.
Yeah.
It becomes standard operating procedure for you.
There you go. There you go. One of the things I also love about journaling is the fact that you're getting down your thoughts on paper, because we all know that writing is so much more powerful than just thinking it. If once you write it, there's something tangible about it, as opposed to even just typing it out on a computer. It's not the same thing. When you manually handwrite it, there's something powerful about that.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And, what a wonderful tool to express feeling, emotion, and different things is the written word, and having the ability to be able to just lay it out, just to let it spill out of our soul's energy, of our mind, our hearts, our bodies. How magnificent.
Yeah, that's great. Now, what's so interesting is that people are experiencing challenges every day. What are some of the biggest challenges, or the single biggest challenge you can think of that you had to overcome in your life to sort of get to where you are today? And perhaps did that one challenge put you into the crucible to make you the person you are today?
Well, I think for me, as far as, the work I do and things like that, one of the biggest challenges that I had is something called imposter syndrome. And for your listeners that may not be familiar, imposter syndrome is the feeling of, I'm not good enough. I stink at this. There are other people way better than me. I'm not really doing this. It's all just in my head. I'm making this up. And what happens is it shuts you down, and it shuts you down, and it shuts you down, and it shuts you down. Now, I've now worked with people all over the world, and had I not had the ability, the drive, and the resources to overcome that method of thinking, I wouldn't have helped people. And so it's so important for us to suspend disbelief in ourselves so that we can share messages with others to offer healing to them. And so to get through imposter syndrome, I've worked with my own coach. I've worked with my own mentors, and I've done work on my own to overcome that issue of not feeling good enough, or thinking I'm making it up, or comparing myself to other people. When I think about what I would have missed out on and what others would have missed out on had I not done that, it's a bit mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's like, so many people go through that same feeling, like, I'm not worthy, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm not here. Yet, in order to get to the other side, open your mind to the concept of, well, assume you are okay, and assume and realize what you actually can be contributing. How can you be helping everybody else?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Isn't that what we're really here on Earth to do, is ultimately to try to not only heal ourselves and learn things by ourselves, but also to try to help everybody, no matter who they are?
Absolutely. And, when we step into our true power and purpose here in the physical world, it is just astonishing the things that come into play and that open up and that become available to us, because we're living what our soul is here to do, Chris. And I'm sure you've experienced that in your own life, because I know that you're an incredible psychic medium yourself. And so when we step into that part of our path, our journey, when we say, oh, I was afraid, but okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to give it a shot, the universe is like, finally.
Yes. Oh, I've been there.
And so, a big part also of overcoming imposter syndrome that I feel like is important in this work is finding community. Community to study with, community to grow with, community to chat with, because there's nothing worse than experiencing a spiritual awakening or uncovering your gifts and not having anybody to talk to about it. And it's like, so don't be an island.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Exactly.
really, really fascinating.
So what is it that motivates you to keep going in your work, to keep learning, keep expanding, keep on sharing all of your gifts?
My goal when all of this started was really to help other people heal. And whether it be in readings, helping people connect with their loved ones in spirit, helping them connect with their higher selves, talking to them about, their life path and things like that, whether it's doing readings or, helping parents, parenting intuitive kids, or sharing my words in my written words in a book, or working with people to mentor them, develop their own gifts, or, working with executive teams and CEOs, helping them realize that their intuition can take them to the next level. It's all about helping other people, helping them heal, helping them unpack their muggle stuff and step into their magical stuff, and then blending the two to make something really special so that they can have an impact in the world.
Beautiful. So you love helping people to get them to the point where they can then turn their energy into impacting others.
100%.
Great. That's so beautiful. If you were to, speak one-on-one to a listener just now, what would be the one biggest thing that you could tell somebody that you feel could help them? Big question.
I think it's important for them to believe. The word believe is so important. And not just believing in the spirit world, believing in life after death, believing in intuition, believing in the unseen, but believing in themselves, believing and knowing that everyone who comes here into human existence is intuitively gifted. It is our birthright. It is not just for some people, it's for all people. And it may not look like what I do or what you do, Chris, or what other intuitive mediums do. It may be just a personal relationship with spirit. But we're all born as intuitive beings. It's whether or not we choose to develop those assets. And so the word believe is paramount to next steps, to development, to self-love, and to ultimately going out and making an impact.
Great. Are we spirits living in a material world, as Sting once wrote?
100%. I always like to say we're souls having a human experience. And, certainly I will sometimes refer to my human body as my meat suit. But the reality is, yes, we are souls' energies. It is my belief that have lived many lifetimes before and will many more. And we're here on this plane of physical existence in the human world. But certainly our souls' energies are what we house in our human form, as opposed to the other way around. And how interesting it would be if we just saw people by soul energy as opposed to human form. It would be such an interesting thing to experience. But yeah, I 100% agree with you and definitely am on board with that theory that we are indeed souls having a very human experience.
Right. Well, great. Well, this is absolutely lovely, and I love speaking to you again, Deb. And this has hopefully been such an educational, informative, little episode for people to understand, where you are and where you're coming from. How can people get in contact with you? What's the best method of reaching you?
The best method would be to go to my website, which is debdecelle.com. So DEBDECELLE.com, or my social media for Facebook or Instagram are Deb DeCelle Medium, all lowercase, all one word. Those are the best ways to connect with me.
Well, great. Well, we'll have all that information in the show notes, and we'll have all of Deb's data and all that lovely stuff in the show notes. So make sure that you take a look at the show notes at www.spiritsbesideus.com. You can also see much more there. And with that, this is Chris signing off for now, and I will see you next Wednesday, where we're going to have another beautiful episode. And remember, if you are enjoying this show, just remember to rate and review. So this is Chris sending you love and light until next week. Bye for now.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.